Hey, well, some of you have been busy waiting for the next production, the next publication, and my spirit hasn't been driving me to do it these last couple of days, and I've had when that is happening, I've got so much going on in my mind about the different things that's happened to me in my life, and it's like, how am I going to spill it all out? What am I going to talk about first? And should I just continue on this kind of documented timeline? It's a jumble of all sorts in my mind, in my head. And one of the things that's been going on in my head lately is I've been thinking about the people that I've lost. I've been thinking about my great grandmother. I haven't told you about how she died and what day she died, and what all that felt like. I was still pregnant. And it was the December of 1981. She died on Christmas Day. I had left my mother to go and live back in the village for the last time, and things were going okay. It was Christmas, and actually on Christmas Day itself, I found myself, because as girls we had to prepare the meal. And so animals are slaughtered for meat. We have pigs slaughtered, we have cows slaughtered, we have chicken, we have turkeys. Not everybody has turkeys back home, but my grandmother had a couple of turkeys, and we did have a turkey that day and a few chickens slaughtered to cook, and pigs for, pork meat. So we were busy preparing for that so that we could have this massive feast, rice and bread and all sorts of lots of food that, we were preparing. But we sort of arranged to eat the main meal in the evening. And during the day, sort of midday, I thought, we thought we'll cook something small, each one in their own little huts, and ate that. And we didn't have maize meal, so I had to grind some in this hand machine, and my great grandmother came to try and help me. And something happened at that particular moment when she was holding the hand of the wheel that you used to grind the corn. And she's on one side, we're facing each other, holding the same handle, and I could not look at her in the face. I was overwhelmed with shyness, intense shyness. I could not look at her. And I never questioned that. Not one moment at that particular time. It was only afterwards, after she had died, that is when I thought, so this is what it is when someone is about to die. Something happens. This is how they affect other people. But that is obviously how she affected me. Whether someone else had felt it with her, I don't know. But we had such a close bond. And on that particular moment, when we should have just been looking at each other, grinding the maize and chatting and laughing, I was overwhelmed with shyness. I couldn't look at her in the face. And because I think I told you earlier that how the villages disbanded, the people went on small holdings, and we were the first ones to leave the village. No, actually, it's the second ones to leave the village to go and live independently on a small holding not far from where Luther's granddad lived, and so we were living on that small holding. And then what was happening is, while us younger ones were preparing the food, the grown-ups decided that they were going to go to the main village where everybody else still lived and just say, Happy Christmas to everybody there. So my grandmother, all day on that day, and I think that was like the first time that had happened, my grandmother, my granddad, all the adults apart from my great-grandmother, they were drinking spirits. They're drinking wines, they were drinking whiskeys, they were drinking amarula, they were drinking, all sorts of, brandy. They had bottles and bottles of it. I mean, I never seen anything like that in the village. That was the first time. So great uncle Green and grandma, they were all doing that, and great uncle Green's wives, they were all getting drunk. And another thing is we didn't drink coffee. So that day we drank coffee that morning. We had coffee. And Green also, where he was living not far from us. So we were like neighbors of the small holding, not even a mile, maybe 200 yards from us. So great Uncle Green and his wives and his kids they had coffee, and great grandma that morning had gone there to have coffee and tea or whatever it is that they had, bread and cakes and what have you. So she had it she had that in the at Green's. And I think because she didn't like coffee, she came back going on about, I didn't like coffee, I had to drink it. I think it was Green's younger wife who made it for her, and she didn't like it because she found it bitter. And so, that was like her talk on that day. Oh, I didn't like that coffee, it was a bit bitter. So all of them, went to the main village, and us younger ones, myself, Auntie Josephine, Auntie Fanny, and the others around, younger ones cooking. And the boys, they all went to the village, and suddenly they came back. I mean, I'm not quite sure who arrived first. I think it was Kenneth, the man who, came to try and do bad things to Josephine and I in our hut. And he said, and we'd almost finished cooking, but, we were all waiting to sit down now and eat. And he came back first and he said, we have bad news. Your great grandma has died. And it was like, what do you mean she's died? Yes, she's died. How? Well, we don't know. And so the story was, when everybody arrived in the old village, and the people who were left there, grandmother's cousins, one of them started to attack her, saying, what are you doing? What are you doing coming to us? We thought, you are the rich one who has left the village, and you don't want us to see all the good stuff you're having where you live. You're drinking spirits, like the white man, things like, do you even poo white man's poo? You don't poo black poo anymore, as if there is any such kind of nonsense. Poo is poo. It doesn't matter whose it is. So anyway, he attacked her. I think his name Harrison, grandma's cousin. He attacked her. And that upset my great-grandmother when she noticed this, because there was no welcome. And the people from the small holding that I lived with, my grandma and everybody else, when they went to the village, they were with good intentions to say Happy Christmas and then come back, and then we would eat the main meal. And they got attacked like that. So great-grandma didn't want to watch that, so she decided to go back and leave them to it. But you see, another thing is with my great-grandmother, she didn't walk. Wherever she went, she jogged. So she was a jogger, always jogging. And so she started jogging back. And I don't know what happened. Whatever happened, she was found collapsed and dead under a shrub. And this sort of lots of stuff came to my mind on that day, because throughout her life, our lives together, whenever she would tell us certain stories, she would say, I am Muchimba, I am Muchimba, I am Mudenda, I am, all these names that she would say she is. And I'm not going to die a house death. I'm going to die in the jungle, because I am the animal, all these animals that she claimed to be, from the names that she, her native names. So she constantly would say, I'll never die a house death. And to me, instantly, when they said they found her dead under a shrub, I thought to myself, that's what she kept saying. That she knew she was going to be dying like that under a shrub. So anyway, they sorted out. They brought her body back to her house, and we had better houses then. made of metal roof, and there was more than one room in the house. It wasn't just like a mud hut that we were living in before. So she had a house. I think it was 3-roomed house, and so they laid her body there. We didn't eat. Nobody ate at all. It was Christmas Day. This is when we were supposed to be having our feast. And what happens? The main woman of the village, the elder of our holding, dies. So nobody wanted to eat, and I felt numb. Everybody around me was crying, but I was just numb. It was as if it happened to somebody else. And when people were talking, it's as if they were talking from a distance and like a hum. I just wasn't hearing them. And that was about 6 o'clock in the evening when she died, because we were going to have an evening meal. So when she died, it was in the evening. By the time they brought her body back to her house, it was about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and it's pitch dark by then. And from what we estimate to be around 10 o'clock, her body had swollen in a massive swelling of the body. And there was a massive hoo-ha, my grandmother going on about, where they poisoned her where she went to have breakfast. She kept complaining about the bitter coffee. They must have put logo in her coffee, this kind of thing and all this kind of nonsense. But in an actual fact, for me now, with a bit of education, I can look back, and from what I've discussed with my my consultants at the hospital, she died instantly. Of course, she collapsed and died instantly. And the thing that can kill you like that is this heart condition that I have. And it must be that she must have gone in instant heart failure and like a heart attack or something. And all of that fluid, because what happens is when you are, when you have heart failure, you have fluid buildup around your heart. That is why you can't, you're puffing, you're failing for breath and that kind of thing. It's like you're drowning within yourself. And that could be that fluid that just filled her body like that. But of course, we will never know. We will never know. I don't think it was the swelling because she had the poison in her body. I think it is just something else, probably to do with her heart. But apparently she had a bit of foam on her mouth, and they thought that she'd been poisoned or something. And they had to bury her very quickly the next morning, because otherwise they thought that the body would have burst. So they didn't hang around. They didn't wait. Normally they would wait for people who are coming from towns and things like that. Like my mother, she was coming from a bit far away in the Copper Belt, which took the train 2 days. But obviously she wouldn't have come on a train. She would have come in a police car and that kind of thing. They would have driven her, so she would have got there, within the day. Push come to shove, but she wouldn't have made it. She would have started off like today, and she would have arrived tomorrow. So there was no way she would have arrived there on the same day. She'd have arrived in Livingstone on the same day, but then the next day she would have had to then travel to the village. So they weren't there when she was buried. And for years and years and years and years, I was just a bit numbish, and I really wondered, is that what happens when someone is about to die? If they're dying on that day, there's something about them that you can't look at. And I could not look at my own mother, who I called mother, a person I quite happily called mother, the person I felt quite comfortable around, and I could not call her mother. Not that I couldn't call her mother. I didn't feel the comfort. I didn't feel the easiness around her. I just had this intense shyness. And is that what happens when someone you're so close is dying? I've never seen it like that. I mean, when my husband died, I remember for him on that day, also he died in the evening at night, and it was tea time-ish again, evening time around 6 o'clock, half 5, 6 o'clock, and giving him his last medication. He couldn't take it himself. He couldn't sit up straight, and I had to get my stepson to hold him at the back and for me to give it to him. Whether because of my age and I hadn't come across, these kind of things, I had never realized that was him too ill and he would die that day. I did not feel the same kind of intense shyness from him. So I didn't actually know that he was going to be dead on that day. Whether he felt like that towards me, I don't know. Obviously, I can't ask him. He died. And I knew that, he started making this funny grunting type noise as a couple after an hour or so, a couple of hours. And I thought, it sounds like he's in pain. So let me call the ambulance. So I called the ambulance. I'll tell you a bit more about that because, part of where my hatred from my stepkids stems from that time. Some of it, not all of it, just some of it. So I'll tell you about that when I get to it. So, that's been going on in my head. So I've been thinking about the people that I've lost, and I've been thinking about my son, and I think it's like for the first time, I don't feel cautious of him around. I do know that he's around in this house. Because sometimes I smell him, sometimes things, move or get dropped, especially if I'm doing something and I'm thinking to myself, oh, how did that happen? So suddenly he comes to my mind and think, you don't want me to be doing that, do you? Or a cup will just drop off my hand, because I'm shaking or something. It's just like somehow I lose the grip, or I think that shouldn't have happened. It's just so bizarre. Or I'm in my in the bathroom, especially in the evening, brushing my teeth. If I'm stood directly in the mirror, I feel the presence in the back of me, as if to say, get off the mirror. I'm also brushing my teeth, so I have to go lean against the door so that the mirror is free. So now I don't have to wait for that because I instantly feel it. So I all the time I go to brush my teeth, I'm leaning against the door so that someone who stood by the door can see inside the mirror. I've seen bits of like flashing, and I'm thinking, what was that? A bit like I don't know, like a firefly or something like that. And you're in the house, there's no fireflies in the house, but that that kind of thing, smells and things like that. So it's like and I've been very cautious and thinking of him lately. I don't know what brought all that on. So anyways. That is what happened with my great-grandmother's death. And of course, at that time, I didn't just lose great-grandma. I also lost the only person I quite freely called Dad, her husband, Makandauko. He had 2 wives, and that meant he wasn't coming to us anymore because he didn't have any children with my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was divorced from my grandmother's my grandmother and great uncle Phineas's dad, and then she married Makandauko, and I think between the 2 husbands, she lost 15 pregnancies. They all, they were either born and lived for the day and they died the next day, or they were stillborn, and she lost 15 pregnancies, and only 2 survived. My grandma and great uncle Phineas, and he had mental health problems, and he passed away last year, November 2019. So grandma is basically, on her own. Her cousin, who she was brought up together with, as like a brother and sister, Green, great uncle Green. he passed away some time back. And his sister, Esther, also passed away some time back. So she's basically, the only child now, literally, the only person in that family left. You see, I'm talking now and I smell cigarette. I don't smoke. And it's the kind that Jack used to smoke. It's that bizarre. So I don't know anyone who smokes. Maybe the neighbors smoke. I don't know, but I've never smelt. This is the first one, smelling cigarettes. And that is just, I don't know. That's just how it is. So, right. And a couple of my friends have been saying, "Oh, hey, come on, stop doing this blooming filling the gaps. We want to hear about what happened after you became nanny to these kids. What was life there like? Did you actually stay in the house that you've been arranging?" And no, I didn't stay in the house, and I'm going to leave this one here, and then when I come back, I just wanted to fill the gap. Yes. Oh my God, the auntie probably laughing. And I said, she's at it now. She's at it. She's going to say, hang on a minute. I'm just filling the gap between. Yeah, right. So yeah, I'm just filling that little gap because I've been thinking a lot about my great grandma, and I hadn't said anything about her because, as I say, I didn't just lose her on that day, Christmas Day, 1981. I also lost Makandaoko because he wasn't dead, but he obviously stopped coming because there was nothing to come back for. His wife had died. We didn't have any children, so he stayed at his other wife, and that was that until he died. That was sad because, and especially when he had to take his things with him. I mean, he didn't have much in terms of tangible stuff, but he had lots of livestock. And so they had to go to where his other wife was. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we could have managed that better. We could have had times when we could have visited him and things like that. But we didn't do that for whatever reasons. I have no idea. I mean, these relationships, only grown-ups knew, and only grown-ups enabled us to develop a certain kind of attachment. And although I was attached to him, I never actually visited him at the other wife's place. It was, 10 miles away from where we lived. And, that's that. So, yeah, it's, that's how it was. So, unfortunately, my great-grandmother didn't live to see, I was pregnant. She could have had a great-great-grandchild, but that great-great-grandchild hadn't lived, but also it wasn't born before she died, because she died in Christmas Day, 81, and the baby stillborn on, full-term stillborn on 22nd May, 1982. Yeah, that's how it was. So, the next one I will talk about, life at the new place with these kids and their dad. Yeah. Well, there we go. Okay. Tara.